All right, everybody, we are going to be learning how to make tables and figures in Excel and then transferring those over to a Word document. The Word document we're going to be using is the one hopefully you guys are familiar with at this point, and that is your research paper template. You guys should have an introduction to methods up to this point and even some semblance of a literature cited section. Today, we're going to be helping you provide your tables and figures. Your lab instructor will provide an instruction on how to create the narrative form of your results section. Remember, your results is not just tables and figures. You're going to describe the patterns that you found, and you're going to reference those or cite the tables and figures in your results section. So we'll go ahead and tuck this to the side over here. Now, in your data presentation lab, it's broken up in two parts. Part one is we teach you how to use different calculations in Excel to produce descriptive statistics, the same descriptive statistics that you guys have produced in other labs, okay? Part two is we're going to teach you how to create graphs using means and 95% confidence intervals. And so we have instructions here, and in this video, we'll kind of work you through all of these examples. And then lastly, we're going to help you transfer finished product over to your research paper template. But to get going, we want to focus on the Excel calculations first. So I have here an Excel file with the data from students' recycling project from last semester. And this is going to look very similar to the one that you guys are going to be working with. We're going to have a column that's called sample, and this is going to be every student's data that they submitted last semester. So this would be a student and what they submitted. So it says household here because this is representing households corrected for the number of people living in each household. So essentially what I did was, with student one that submitted their stuff on the Google form, I took all the totals and I divided it by the number of people living in that household. So we have a corrected number here for each one of their data values. This is all corrected for the number of people living in their household so that we can compare apples to apples here. For example, if household one had 6 people in it and household 2 had 2 people in it, I took the values and I divided by 2, and I took these values and divided by 6, so that it's on a per person basis, all right? I also converted these values, the mass values from pounds to grams, and the volume values from inches cubed to centimeters cubed. This is the metric system, and this is what we use in science, okay? So the first thing we're gonna want to do is produce, just like it says in part one, some very familiar descriptive statistics. Our mean, sample size, the standard deviation, the standard error, and our 95% confidence intervals, okay? Now to calculate the mean, another word for mean is average, right? So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna type an equal sign. Now, when you're working with Excel and you type an equal sign in a cell before anything else, Excel is now ready for you to give it some sort of command or type in a formula or an equation. In this case, we're going to type in a formula. It's kind of an auto formula that Excel has in kind of a banked list. We're going to start just typing the word average, and you'll notice that it pops up here in blue. We're going to double click that. And so essentially we're going to be telling Excel to take the average of whatever we put inside these parentheses. We're going to highlight all these cells minus the header, close the parentheses, click enter. Now have our mean. We want to find the sample size, and for that, we're going to tell Excel to count. And there's count. We're going to do the same thing. Highlight the same cells without the header, close the parentheses, click enter. Next, we want to do the standard deviation. This one's a little different. We're going to start with our equal sign, and then we're going to type in ST And as soon as you type in ST, you're going to want to select the stdev.s. Okay. The .s is different than the .p. The .s is referencing the standard deviation of a sample. And we are only working with a sample. So we might have 100 students recycling data, but that's just a sample of the bigger population in question, right? Which could be all the students at CSUB, it could be households in Bakersfield. We didn't sample all the students, we didn't sample all the households in Bakersfield. So we're working with a sample. We're going to double click that guy. And we're going to select the same group of cells minus the header, close the parentheses, click enter. Now for our standard error, there's no nifty little Excel formula. We actually have to type this one in, but you guys know this. The standard error is the it's the standard deviation divided by the square root of our sample size. So we just need to tell Excel to do that for us. So we start with an equals. We want this value, which is our standard deviation, divided by the square root, and we're going to type in a formula here. Select square root. We want the square root of n, close parentheses. Now we have our standard error. And our 95% confidence intervals, that is confidence interval. We have here our standard error multiplied by 2. Now to do the multiplication in Excel, use the asterisk, okay? So this is Shift 8. That gives you the asterisk symbol, and we want just the number 2. Now, I'm going to show you a little shortcut. If we have done this correctly, and we have all of our data columns going to the right, we can highlight all these cells, and if you hover over the bottom right hand of your selection, you'll notice my big white plus changes to a small narrow black plus. And when it does that, you're going to click and hold, and you're going to drag, and you'll see the whole selection is kind of dragging over. Now we have effectively done all the calculations for all 4 rows. Pretty slick, huh? The next step, so we've just finished part 1. We did that in just a few minutes. Part 2 is we're going to start creating our graphs. Now, the first thing we want to do is we want to start by creating kind of a little table that we're going to use for our calculations. All right, and so here we want to put, well, we have a couple of ways we can do this. Why don't we go ahead and do this? We're going to copy these values here. Now, you're going to be creating 2 tables and 2 figures. One table and 1 figure will be for the mass of your recycling data. And the other table and the other figure will be for the volume. So let's focus on the mass here. We have our no recycling mass on a recycling mass. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to copy these values. Down here, I'm going to right click, and under paste special, this little arrow here, I didn't press anything, I just hovered over it. We're going to go to paste special. I'm going to click on this, and we want to paste just our values, and we want to transpose them. Okay, now we have just our values, and we have all this stuff just kind of, it's just kind of twisted, right? So these are across the top, and these are all laid out. Now we can create our little table here. We're gonna want to move. We're gonna want to move everything over real quick. So I'm just gonna insert cells to the right. All right, so I just created a space there. And here we want our household type. And that's going to be our group labels, okay? And for this first one, I believe this, let's just verify. Our first one is no recycling. Our second one is recycling. All right, so no recycling and recycling. And this should make sense. No recycling should be more than our recycling, okay? Now that we have this, we're gonna wanna highlight these 4 cells. And once you've done that, you go to Insert from your Microsoft Office ribbon up here, and you go into the middle where charts are, and select this upper left option. And then the upper left option again, we have the chart that we want to use. We're gonna move this below so we can kind of see what's going on here. Make this just a little bit smaller. Okay. All right, so we have our standard graph here. The first thing that we want to do to this is we want to delete the chart title. We want to delete the grid lines. Okay. The next thing we want to do is there's a couple of ways of adding your axis titles. You can do it under Add Chart Element. Under here, primary horizontal, primary vertical, but it's actually easier just to do this little plus off the side of this graph. You need to make sure it's selected though, okay? Select the graph, hit your plus, do axis titles, and it puts them both in there. Now we're gonna change our y-axis. I'm just clicking in this box, deleting this. We wanna change this to mass of household trash. And it's going to be in grams. Okay. Then want to do the same thing to this guy. Or change it. Don't want to do the same thing. Down here, we want to put our household type. Okay. Which type of household? We have our no recycling household and our recycling household. Okay. So this is what your graph should look like at this point. So the next step we have is going to be a series of minor steps that help just clean up the overall appearance and make the graph look professional. The first one is going to be adding a y-axis line. So we're going to do that by selecting our y-axis values. Our format axis panel comes up. I want to click on the little paint can, and under line, we want to do a solid line. Okay. And while we're still in this, we want to change the color to black. This might look a little funny, right? Got one black line here. Well, we need to do the same thing for our x-axis. So we'll click on the x-axis values, go into the paint can, go into solid line, and it already updated it to black. Next thing we want to do is we want to click on the whole graph, so just the outside edge, and under the Home tab in the Microsoft Office ribbon, we want to go to our font color, okay? And under font color, we want to select black, or automatic in this case. Now it's looking a little better. While we're in the font settings, we want to increase the font size to 12. I'm going to pump that up to 12, okay? Next thing we want to do is add tick marks. We're going to click on our y-axis, and under the 3 bar graph little symbol here, we're going to go to tick marks. We're going to go to major type and outside. And we're going to click on our x-axis. And we're going to go to minor type. So this one's a little different. We want minor type outside. Okay, so now you should have a tick mark referencing everything on the graph. Okay. Next thing we want to do is we want to change the color of our bars. Okay, we want to change them to a gray color. We're going to go to our little paint can here under the Format Data Series. And under Fill, we want to change this to a gray. And under Border, we want to do no line. Okay, so now we don't have a border around our gray bars. We have our nice gray bars. Next thing we want to do is we want to remove the outline of our graph. You see this gray line around the whole graph? We're going to remove that. We're going to just select the graph, and it's going to bring up format chart area. And under border, we're going to select no line. Line disappears. Looks wonderful. Okay. Now we've got our graph looking very nice. The next thing we want to do is we want to add the 95% confidence intervals. The way we do that is we're going to select the graph, and under the plus sign, under chart elements, we're going to go into error bars. Okay, now before I select this, I want to actually push this little button here, the arrow, and I want to go to more options. And under more options, under format error bars, I'm going to select the error bar options. I'm going to make sure that both and cap are selected, and I'm going to select custom. And under custom, I'm going to specify value. And under the positive error value, while that's all grayed out, we're going to just copy those values in there, okay? And then under the negative value, we're going to have to delete that out, and we're going to select the same values again. So the same values for the positive as the negative, then you click OK. All right, now we want to change the color of the error bars. It's changed the color so it's a little closer to our bar, which we don't want. So we'll go back into the paint can. And we are going to just change the color here under the line section to black. All right. So that is it. We just created our figure. Now this is just one of two figures. You, of course, will be creating two. We've also created our table up here without you really even knowing. So the next thing we want to do is we want to copy and paste this information over to Word. So I'm going to do that. I am going to copy my table. I just highlighted it, copy, and go into my research paper template. And under tables and figures, I'm going to do table 1, and we're going to give it a caption here in a moment. I'm going to Control V, and let me right click, and you're just going to paste values in here. Now you'll notice that it went off the edge. That's okay. We're going to select the graph, and we're going to select these columns. Okay, just getting this to where the little black arrow pops up, and we're just going to squeeze these in a little bit. Okay, you can do it a little quicker by double clicking the border edge. Just sucks it right in. But let's just get them all. Okay, that's good. We can at least see everything on the table. We do want to extend this guy out. I'm going to double click that so everything's on one single line. All right, the next thing we want to do is we only want like one decimal place. So we're going to delete all these. We're going to want to make sure that we carry out any rounding that needs to be done. This 39.5 will stay 39.5. This will change to a 2 because this is a 5 right here. So we'll delete this whole thing. We'll put a 2. This will change to a 4 because a 6 was right behind it. This will change to a 9 because there's an 8 behind it. This guy remains the same. This will change to an 8. All right. It's still kind of a little ugly. So what I like to do is we're going to highlight all these and we're going to center them. So we have them centered. The next thing we're going to want to do is distribute the columns equally. So having all that selected, if you go to layout, you're going to select distribute columns, and it just kind of spaces everything out evenly. All right, we're getting really close now. Next thing we want to do is we want to highlight this top row that has all of kind of our headers on it. And we want to go under home. We want to give it a bottom border. We want to give it a top border. And then under the very bottom of the table, oh, it actually popped up there. It's easier if you just do it here. see if it pops up again. There we go. You want to give it a bottom border. And boom, we got our table done. I'm just going to go ahead and copy our table caption. You're going to want to prepare your own table captions, but for the purpose of this exercise, whoops, we'll just copy what we have over there. So we have our table 1, the caption, and our table. Now, remember that you're going to have 2 tables, okay? This table is for mass. The second table will be for volume, but it's going to look very similar. After we do that, we need to do our figure. We'll give ourselves a little bit of space here. We're going to maybe put in our figure caption. And now we want to go back to our Excel. We want to grab our graph. We're going to copy it. And we're going to paste it. All right. And this, we don't have to modify anything. We just need to put the figure caption, which is, I'm just, again, grabbing out of our lab. And there we go. Now, remember, this would be the mass figure, okay? You're gonna need to also produce a volume figure, all right? So you'll repeat, just rinse and repeat. Do the same process we just went through now for both your volume and mass figures, okay, using your data. But that, you guys, that takes us through, let's pull up our little lab here. That brings us all the way to, you're going to want to make sure you repeat again for your volume measurements. We just copied and pasted everything from part 2. And these are the example table and figure that we just produced, okay? So if you have any questions, please consult your lab instructor and they should be able to help you sort it out. But other than that, you guys, we will see you in lecture.